Tasha stepped out of the taxi, stretching her stiff legs as she took in the bustling streets of Lagos. The sun had begun its descent, casting a golden glow over the city, but the streets were far from slowing down. The air was thick with the scent of roasted suya, car exhaust, and the distant aroma of puff-puff frying at a roadside stand. Horns blared as impatient drivers shouted at one another, weaving through the barely moving traffic. It was chaos, the kind only Lagos could perfect. As she reached for her suitcase, a loud wail pierced the air. A baby in a nearby Kiki tricycle flailed its tiny arms, and before she could react, a chubby little hand knocked a bottle of juice straight onto her shirt. Cold, sticky liquid seeped into the fabric as she gasped, looking down at the growing stain. The child's mother barely noticed, too busy haggling with the driver over change. Tasha sighed, dabbing at her shirt with a tissue. As if things couldn't get any worse, a couple arguing in front of her suddenly erupted into full-blown shouting. The man flung his arm dramatically, nearly knocking Tasha's suitcase from her grip. She barely managed to steady herself before shooting them a glare. Lagos wasn't giving her an easy welcome. Muttering under her breath, she tightened her grip on her bags and pushed through the lively, chaotic street until she finally reached the apartment complex. Just as she was about to knock, the door swung open to reveal her best friend, Amara, who let out an excited squeal before pulling her into a tight hug. "Finally! You're here!" Amara cried, bouncing slightly on her toes. Tasha laughed, returning the hug, though her arms felt like they were about to fall off. "I missed you too, Amara, but can we take this inside?" "My arms are about to give out." Amara snatched one of the heavier bags and led the way in. The apartment was cozy with vibrant throw pillows scattered across the couch and a soft glow from warm-colored string lights draped along the walls. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mixed with a hint of vanilla-scented candles. It was exactly what Tasha needed after the madness outside. "You're going to love it here," Amara said, flopping onto the couch. "New job, new city, and let's not forget Lagos, men. Ah, opportunities everywhere." Tasha sighed as she plopped down beside her. "Honestly, I'm just glad I have a place to stay before I find my own apartment. Thanks for letting me crash here." "Crash?" Amara scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Girl, you're family. But before we even think about anything else, let's talk about something important. Tonight." Tasha groaned. "Please don't say what I think you're about to say." Amara grinned. "We are going out to celebrate." "Amara, I just arrived. Can't we do this tomorrow?" "Absolutely not." Amara crossed her arms. "You're starting a new chapter, and what better way to welcome it than with a little fun? Lagos is calling, babes. You owe me at least one drink." Tasha hesitated. She wasn't in the mood for partying, but she knew Amara wasn't one to take no for an answer. "Fine," she relented, "but just one drink." Amara smirked. "That's what they all say." Tasha stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the black dress Amara had forced her into. It clung to her curves, showing more skin than she was comfortable with. She turned slightly, eyeing herself with mild uncertainty. "Do I really have to wear this?" "Yes," Amara called from across the room, applying a glossy red lipstick in the mirror. "You need to embrace your Lagos baddie era. Big men are going to be at that bar tonight, and we cannot be looking basic." Tasha sighed. "I'm not trying to impress anyone." Amara gasped dramatically. "Tasha, my love, my darling, this is Lagos. You don't dress to impress men, you dress to stunt on them. Now, hush and put on these heels." She tossed a pair of sleek black stilettos in her direction. Tasha groaned but complied. "I'm holding you to that one-drink promise." Sure, Amara said, waving her off with a smirk. "Now let's go before you change your mind." The bar was alive with energy, the deep bass of Afro beats vibrating through the walls. Chandeliers cast a warm, golden light over the sea of well-dressed patrons, laughter and conversation mingling over the music. Waiters weaved through the crowd, trays balanced effortlessly in their hands, while bartenders poured colorful cocktails with practiced ease. Tasha adjusted the hem of her dress as they stepped inside, the scent of expensive cologne and shisha filling the air. She wasn't used to places like this, but Amara? She thrived in them. "Welcome to Lagos," Amara whispered mischievously, winking before leading them deeper into the crowd. The bar was alive with energy, the deep bass of Afro beats vibrating through the walls. Chandeliers cast a warm, golden light over the sea of well-dressed patrons, laughter and conversation mingling over the music. Waiters weaved through the crowd, trays balanced effortlessly in their hands, while bartenders poured colorful cocktails with practiced ease. Tasha clinked glasses with Amara, celebrating a fresh start in Lagos. Leaving Abuja behind after 6 wasted years in a one-sided relationship, she needed a change before she drowned in self-pity. A new city, a new job. This was her chance to rebuild, and Amara was determined to make sure she embraced it properly. The music pulsed through the room as they hit the dance floor. Tasha, a little unsteady from the drinks, moved with enthusiasm rather than rhythm. Graceful was not her strong suit, and her awkward steps earned a few amused glances. Amara, on the other hand, danced with a confidence that drew attention, particularly from a sharp-dressed man across the room. His gaze lingered on her, a silent invitation that she was all too eager to accept. Leaning into Tasha, she whispered, "I'll be back. Some of us have business to handle." Tasha, too caught up in her own wobbly dance moves, barely registered the comment before Amara disappeared, slipping toward the restrooms with the mystery man following closely behind. Amara had a knack for making her own fun wherever she went, and tonight was no exception. Feeling lightheaded, Tasha stumbled toward a nearby seat, sinking into it with a sigh. The world around her spun slightly, the mix of alcohol and flashing lights making everything feel dreamlike. Just as she steadied herself, a deep, velvety voice interrupted her thoughts. Rough night? Or just too much to drink? Tasha looked up to find a strikingly handsome, broad-shouldered Nigerian man standing before her, a quiet air of confidence surrounding him. He didn't have the over-eager energy of most men in the club. He was here to unwind, not impress. His sharp eyes studied her with amusement, as though her slightly tipsy state was entertaining. She smirked, resting her chin in her hand. "Let's just say I'm celebrating my freedom, and I might have underestimated how quickly Lagos cocktails hit." He chuckled, taking a seat beside her. "Lagos doesn't do anything in half measures. What are we toasting to?" Tasha eyed him playfully. "New beginnings, and maybe new mistakes." He lifted his glass. "To both, then." As they clinked glasses, Tasha couldn't help but think, maybe Lagos had more surprises in store for her than she expected. After a while, she glanced around, suddenly realizing Amara was nowhere in sight. Frowning, she turned to a passing bartender. "Hey, did you see my friend? She was with me earlier, tall, braided hair, loves trouble." The bartender smirked, wiping down the counter. "Oh, the lively one. She left with some alhaji a while ago. Looked like he was ready to spoil her." Tasha groaned, rubbing her temples. Typical Amara. She couldn't exactly blame her. Amara lived for the thrill of the night, but that left Tasha with one problem. She was too drunk to go home alone. She turned back toward the man beside her. He had been watching her with quiet amusement, sipping his drink. "Looks like your friend ditched you." Tasha sighed. "Yep. And I don't think I can trust myself to find my way home in this state." He leaned back in his chair, considering her for a moment before offering, "I could drop you off. Lagos isn't the best place to navigate when you're tipsy." Tasha looked at him skeptically. "And how do I know you're not some weirdo looking to take advantage of a drunk woman?" He grinned, extending a hand. "I'm Jidenna. Now that we're not strangers, you can trust me a little, right?" Tasha laughed, shaking his hand. That's debatable. Jidenna chuckled. Fair enough, but I promise, no funny business. Or, unless you ask nicely. She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smirk. Fine, but only if you're taking me straight home. As they stepped out of the bar, the cool Lagos night air hit her, a welcome contrast to the heated, crowded lounge. Jidenna led her to his sleek black car, opening the door for her like a gentleman. As she slid in, he turned to her with a knowing smirk. Or, if you're too tired to head straight home, you could come over to mine for a bit. Just to relax. No pressure. Tasha hesitated for half a second before shrugging. Why not? I could use a little more unwinding. Jidenna's smirk deepened as he shut the door and walked around to the driver's side. Now that, Tasha, is the best decision you've made all night. As he pressed down on the accelerator, the cityscape blurred past them in streaks of neon and headlights. Tasha, slumped against the seat, felt herself surrendering to the unknown. The ride was eerily calm, the hum of the engine blending with the soft, sultry jazz playing from the speakers. Stealing glances at Jidenna, she studied his relaxed grip on the steering wheel, his expression unreadable, yet oddly soothing. She should have felt uneasy, but between the lingering effects of the alcohol and the steady rhythm of the ride, caution seemed to slip from her grasp, replaced by an unsettling curiosity. This was reckless. She knew it. But Lagos was a city of impulses, and tonight, she wasn't in the mood to resist them. As Jidenna drove through the dimly lit streets of Lagos, Tasha felt a sudden urge to change her mind. A sliver of hesitation slipped through the drunken haze clouding her thoughts. She opened her mouth, but the words tangled with the lingering taste of alcohol and uncertainty. The city lights flickered through the car window, playing tricks on her already dazed mind. Jidenna glanced at her briefly, as if sensing her inner turmoil. You all right? His voice was smooth, careful, as if he knew she was struggling with something but wasn't about to press. She let out a lazy sigh, her head tilting against the seat. Maybe I should just... The rest of the sentence faded into nothingness, drowned by the rhythmic jazz humming from the speakers. She was too intoxicated to make clear decisions, and deep down, she knew it. By the time they arrived at his high-rise apartment, she had given up on second-guessing herself. He parked in the underground lot, stepped out, and circled the car to open the door for her. The gentlemanly gesture made her chuckle, though the alcohol had her emotions all over the place. As she stumbled out, she eyed him with mock suspicion. Is this how you treat women? She blurted out, suddenly dramatic. Jidenna raised an eyebrow, taken aback. What? You're acting all polite, she slurred, pointing a finger at him. Like you're scared to even touch me. He laughed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. That's because I am. She frowned. Why? He exhaled, leading the way into the elevator. Because I don't want you waking up tomorrow thinking I took advantage of you. Tasha's lips parted slightly, his words sinking in. He was being cautious, maybe too much so. The elevator ride was quiet, filled with nothing but the soft chime of passing floors. When the doors slid open, he guided her into his sleek, modern apartment, clean, minimalist, with the faint scent of vanilla and leather lingering in the air. She barely had time to take in her surroundings before she lost her balance slightly, and in an instant, Jidenna scooped her up effortlessly. She let out a surprised yelp. Easy there, he murmured, carrying her toward the plush couch. As he gently laid her down, her fingers instinctively gripped his shirt, refusing to let go. Her breathing slowed, her pulse unsteady. What do you need? He asked, kneeling beside her. She stared up at him, her eyes hazy, but filled with something unmistakable. The answer was obvious, but somehow he wasn't seeing it, or maybe he was pretending not to. He was too careful, too restrained, his body tense, like he was fighting something within himself. I need you. she whispered, her fingers tightening around the fabric of his shirt. Jidenna's jaw tensed, his hands hovered over her, uncertain. Tasha, are you blind? She half laughed, half whispered. Or just scared? His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. She could feel his hesitation, the way his muscles clenched, how his breathing deepened. He wanted this, wanted her, but something in him held back, a frustrating battle she couldn't quite understand. Instead of answering, he reached forward, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. His touch was feather-light, sending warmth through her skin. You're drunk, he finally said, voice strained, like it hurt to even speak those words. And I don't want this to be something you regret. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. Trust me, Jidenna. I know what I want. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. You might think that now, but if I do this, I want you to want it in the morning too. When you're sober. Her chest tightened at his words. Frustration mixed with admiration. Why did he have to be so maddeningly good? You're annoying, she muttered, exhaling sharply. He smiled, finally relaxing just a little. I know. With that, he stood, grabbed a throw blanket, and draped it over her. The warmth seeped into her skin, comforting but completely missing the point. She pouted up at him. You're really not going to… Nope. He smirked, leaning down just enough for his lips to ghost over her forehead. But I'll be here when you wake up. Tasha groaned, rolling onto her side as he chuckled and walked toward the kitchen. He was too cautious, too careful. But maybe, just maybe, that was exactly why she wanted him even more. Jidenna stood in the kitchen, rolling up the sleeves of his shirt as he prepared something light. The soft hum of the fridge filled the quiet space, accompanied by the occasional clink of utensils. He was taking his time, trying to shake off the tension from earlier. His mind was still wrapped around Tasha, her flushed cheeks, the way she had clung to him, the unspoken pull between them. Just as he turned to grab a plate, he heard the shuffle of feet. He looked up, and there she was, tipsy, hair tousled from sleep, a mischievous smirk playing on her lips. She leaned against the doorway, watching him with teasing eyes. You cook too? She murmured, voice slow and playful. He chuckled, shaking his head. It's just something light. You should be resting. She ignored his words, stepping forward, her hips swaying just slightly. You're being too careful again, she teased, tilting her head. I don't bite, you know. Jidenna smirked. Oh, I know. She moved closer, her fingers brushing against his arm, tracing up to his shoulder with an intentional slowness that sent a spark through him. He inhaled sharply, gripping the counter. He knew what she was doing, pushing him, trying to crack his control. And if he was honest, it was working. You really want this? His voice was deeper now, husky with restraint. She nodded, her gaze unwavering. And you? That was all it took. In a swift motion he turned, gripping her waist and lifting her onto the counter. She let out a soft gasp, followed by a chuckle, her hands instinctively resting on his shoulders. She felt impossibly soft beneath his touch, like she belonged there. He stood between her legs, his height making her tilt her head up to meet his eyes. For a moment, he just stared at her, tracing his fingers along the curve of her jaw, down her arm, as if memorizing every inch of her. You're beautiful, he murmured, his fingers brushing over her lips. She shivered under his touch, her hands sliding down to his chest. Then why do you keep hesitating? He smirked, leaning in so close their noses nearly touched. Because once I start, I won't stop. Her breath hitched, but instead of answering, she pulled him closer, erasing whatever space was left between them. Their laughter melted into breathless whispers, his lips tracing down her neck, her fingers gripping his shirt, pulling him even closer. He was taking his time, savoring every reaction, every shiver. The restraint he had before, gone. The night unfolded in a haze of warmth and passion, an intoxicating blur of teasing, laughter, and soft moans. He took his time, making sure she felt every touch, every kiss. She was everything, soft, delicate, but with an underlying fire that made him lose himself completely. The next morning, sunlight poured through the sheer curtains, casting a golden glow across the room. Tasha stirred, her body aching in the best way possible. But as her eyes fluttered open, reality crashed down on her. Her heart pounded. She wasn't in her bed. Slowly, she turned her head, her breath catching as she saw Jidenna beside her, his bare chest rising and falling steadily. The memories of last night flooded her mind, heat rushing to her cheeks. "Oh my God," she whispered, sitting up carefully. She glanced around for her clothes, her stomach twisting when she suddenly remembered. Her first day at work. She groaned, pressing a hand to her forehead. "I slept with a stranger, and I have work in a few hours." Jidenna stirred beside her, his voice deep and lazy. "Morning to you too." She turned to him, panic still written all over her face. "This is bad." He smirked, propping himself up on one elbow. "I'd say it was pretty great." She huffed, grabbing the sheets and pulling them over herself. "You're not helping." He chuckled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Relax. You had fun, didn't you?" She bit her lip, avoiding his gaze. "That's not the point." Jidenna leaned in, his fingers trailing down her arm. "Tasha, you're overthinking. You wanted this, I wanted this, and it happened." She sighed, flopping back onto the pillows. "I really don't have time for this existential crisis. I have work." Jidenna smirked. "I could always call in and say you're indisposed." She shot him a glare before burying her face in the pillow. He just laughed, pulling her closer. "Welcome to Lagos, Tasha." Tasha stepped out of Jidenna's apartment, the early morning sun casting a warm glow over the quiet streets. She barely recognized herself. Hair tousled, lips slightly swollen, dress wrinkled beyond salvation. She felt like a bride who had just left her husband after a passionate wedding night. Except this was no honeymoon. This was a one-night stand that had somehow turned her world upside down. Pulling Jidenna's oversized button-up shirt tighter around her, she exhaled sharply, trying to shake off the mix of satisfaction and sheer panic clinging to her. Her heels, dangling from her fingers, clicked against each other as she made her way to the nearest road, flagging down a cab. The driver barely backed. By the time she reached Amara's apartment, she was mentally preparing herself for the interrogation she was about to endure. The second she stepped inside, Amara was waiting, arms crossed, one brow arched in amusement. "Well, well, well, look what the Lagos nightlife dragged in." Amara smirked, leaning against the couch. Tasha groaned, dropping onto the nearest chair. "Please spare me," Amara gasped dramatically. "Oh no, darling, I absolutely will not. You left for a night out and returned looking like a woman who just signed her soul over to the devil. Happily, might I add." Tasha buried her face in her hands. "Amara." "Oh, don't you Amara me. Spill, now." Tasha peeked through her fingers. "I had a little too much to drink." Amara clapped her hands. "Uh-huh, go on." "And I may have," she hesitated, groaning again. "Slept with Jidenna." Amara let out a loud cackle, practically doubling over in laughter. "Oh my God, I knew it, I just knew it. I mean, the man is fine, but damn, Tasha, you wasted no time." Tasha threw a pillow at her. "Stop making it sound worse than it is." Amara dodged, still giggling. "Oh, sweetheart, it's already bad. You had a one-night stand on your first night in Lagos, and now you have to go to work like nothing happened. I am living for this." Tasha groaned again, standing up. "Speaking of work, I have to get ready before my boss fires me before I even start." Amara waved her off. "Go ahead, Cinderella. But you better tell me every detail later." Tasha stomped toward the bathroom, but not before throwing another pillow at Amara, who was still laughing as she disappeared behind the door. The hot water did little to wash away her embarrassment, but as she stared at her reflection in the mirror, she knew one thing for sure. Lagos was about to be one hell of a ride. Tasha had never regretted Lagos traffic more than she did that morning. The roads were packed with impatient drivers honking relentlessly, street vendors weaving through cars, and buses stopping abruptly without warning. Her head was pounding, not just from the hangover, but from the sinking realization that she was late. Very late. By the time she finally arrived at her new workplace, she barely had time to catch her breath. Her heels clicked against the polished floors as she rushed to the receptionist, who barely looked up before directing her. "Conference room, 5th floor, they've already started." Tasha's stomach twisted. Great. Late on her first day, just perfect. She hurried down the hall, adjusting her blouse, trying to look as composed as possible despite the mess she felt inside. As she reached the glass doors of the conference room, she took a deep breath and stepped in. Silence. All eyes turned to her, but none of them struck her as hard as the one pair she least expected to see. Jidenna. Sitting at the head of the table, looking every bit the commanding, powerful man he was, his sharp gaze locked onto her like a predator eyeing its prey. His expression was unreadable, but the subtle arch of his brow told her everything. He was amused. "Nice of you to finally join us, Miss Tasha," he said smoothly, but there was an edge to his voice that sent a chill down her spine. Tasha swallowed hard. Traffic was a nightmare." Jidenna leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled together as he studied her. "I'm sure it was." The tension in the room was palpable. The other executives exchanged glances, clearly aware of the unusual energy crackling between their boss and the new hire. Tasha forced herself to hold his gaze, even though every part of her screamed to look away. Last night's memories flashed through her mind. The way he had held her, the way he had looked at her like she was something rare and precious. And now he was her boss. Could this get any worse? Well, let's just say, Lagos never disappoints when it comes to drama. And speaking of drama, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to keep up with this story. Support the channel so we can bring you more stories just like this. Now back to Tasha. What would you do in her situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.